It was C.S. Lewis who, in his unforgettable Screwtape Letters, wrote, "The greatest evil is not done in concentration camps and labor camps. In those we see its final result. But it is conceived and ordered, moved, seconded, carried in clear, carpeted, warmed, and well-lighted offices by quiet men with white collars and cut fingernails and smooth-shaven cheeks."
Men with white collars and cut fingernails. Got too many of them here. Too many corrupt ones. But if you think what Joe and Hunter Biden did with your money in Ukraine was bad...
And you know what? Did I make a mistake? Well, maybe in the grand scheme of things, yeah.
Just wait until you hear what they did in their backdoor deals with the sleeping giant. A giant so tyrannical, so controlling, the death grip on its people so tight, and a willingness to do anything it can just to maintain its power and control and money and power and control. A giant that kills its own people, innocent, freedom-loving people. And now our very own politicians and business leaders are putting American freedom and your security at stake by selling their souls to those evil leaders overseas just to earn a little of that power that China will do anything to keep. And they're doing it, all of it, behind your back. We know how far China will go. But we don't yet know how far our corrupt American men with white collars will go to get theirs. What they're doing is purely immoral.
I urge you to beware the temptation of pride, the temptation of blithely declaring yourselves above it all.
And they have failed over and over and over again to overcome that temptation. At least, for that reason, this story has to be told. Because temptation is a very, very slippery slope. Justice is out there. It's up to us to chase it. Chase it for our economic and national security, for our country, for the freedom around the world, and the freedom of the next generation.
Hello, America, and welcome to our very first Wednesday night special. I hope this will become an appointment with the two of us every Wednesday night. Tonight, China and the Bidens, too close for comfort. I know that Joe Biden, really, especially after the primary, is yesterday's news. I don't think he's going to be the nominee, but just because he won't be in the Oval Office doesn't mean he's no longer important. What he and his son did in Ukraine must be exposed. We've exposed it, and now it's being investigated by Congress. Laws must be changed so no one in either party can ever do what he did again. But if you think that what is believed to be the largest money laundering scam in U.S. history to fund a possible illegal war with the Russians is bad, you ain't seen nothing yet. In the next 60 minutes, I'm going to make the case that Joe Biden and his son Hunter not only put your security at risk, the future of our country at risk, but also sold you and your children and millions of Chinese into slavery. Now, that's quite a statement. Wow. How does that happen? Well, as always, it starts with just a little mistake, a little corruption here and there. And in Joe Biden's world, it always begins with the family. Let me go to Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. When Hunter graduated from Yale Law School in 1996, he was hired as a lobbyist with MBNA. This is a major credit card company based in Delaware. This, as a reminder, Joe Biden was the senator from Delaware for 36 years before he became vice president. Well, between 1989 and 2008, MBNA was Joe's largest corporate donor. In the Senate, Joe voted against a bill that would require credit card companies to warn consumers of the consequences of making only minimum payments. He also voted 4 times for a bankruptcy bill supported by the credit card industry that made it harder for financially strained borrowers to get any kind of protection from creditors. But I'm sure that had nothing to do with his donor relationship with MBNA. Just like he insists it had nothing to do, and he had nothing to do with MBNA hiring Hunter twice. The first time straight out of law school. And then just a couple of years later, again, 2001 to 2005, as a consultant. When Joe Biden ran for president in 2008, Joe Biden found another family member to help out. He paid over $2 million in campaign cash to his family members and their businesses. $1.8 million of that went to Joe Slade White and Company for media consulting fees. A top executive at that company happened to be Valerie Biden Owens. Now, that's Joe Biden's sister and longtime campaign manager. Biden's campaign also paid $150,000 for legal work to a lobbying and law firm in Washington, D.C., happened to be co-owned by his son, Hunter. In 2008, a report for Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington ranked Biden among the top 5 senators for the amount of money paid to family members over 3 election cycles from 2002 to 2006. Then in 2010, when Joe Biden was vice president, his younger brother, James Biden, was named executive vice president of a construction company called Hillstone. That's great. It was a group of partners, including James Biden, who owned 49% of Hillstone. The only problem with this is that James Biden had no documented work history in the construction industry at all. But 6 months after he joined Hillstone, the company scored a $1.5 billion construction contract from the U.S. government to build 100,000 homes in war-torn Iraq. The minority partners in Hillstone would pocket around $735 million of that contract, minus expenses for the actual construction work. James Biden and his partners would stand to pocket millions of dollars. Well, analysts were puzzled how Hillstone, which was a brand new construction business created in 2010 and had a guy who was a partner who had no experience whatsoever, got such a sweet contract. In a meeting with investors, the president of Hillstone's parent company, David Richter, reportedly told them, and I'm quoting, "It really helps to have the brother of the vice president as a partner," end quote. Other lucrative government deals materialized for Hill International, including in 2012 a $22 million contract to manage the construction of the State Department offices. Those examples are all bad enough, but the biggest sweetheart deals would go to Hunter on his dad's watch as the point man in China for the Obama administration. Now, if you're new to this story, or you just maybe need a refresher, I want to give you the background here. In 2009, Joe Biden was the brand new vice president and John Kerry was a U.S. senator. Just 5 months after Joe was sworn in, his son Hunter and Kerry's stepson, Christopher Hines, formed an international private equity firm called Rosemont Capital. It had several different branches, including one called Rosemont Seneca Partners. Rosemont Seneca's office was in Georgetown, which just happened to be by John Kerry's mansion and the vice presidential residence at the Naval Observatory. So 9 months after Rosemont Seneca opened its doors, they have no investment history, brand new. Hunter Biden went to China for meetings with executives from China's biggest banks and its sovereign wealth and Social Security funds. Now that's pretty amazing access for a brand new firm. Was it just a coincidence that at the same time Hunter was meeting with the Chinese bigwigs, his dad was meeting with China's then President Hu Jintao in Washington, D.C. at a nuclear security summit? Or was it the Biden father and son synergy in action? Well, a year later in 2011, Joe Biden met with Chinese officials again for the U.S.-China Strategic and Economic Dialogue Conference in Washington, D.C. And oddly enough, just 2 weeks later, Hunter Biden went to Taiwan for some strategic and economic dialogue of his own with the same Chinese financial giants that he had met in China in 2010, plus some new ones. Now, most people have not seen these photos of Hunter meeting with his new Chinese best friends. We obtained them from Peter Schweitzer, who did the bulk of the research blowing the lid off the Biden's activities in Ukraine and China for his 2018 book, Secret Empires. But by December 2013, Joe Biden was enjoying his second term as Obama's wingman, and John Kerry was now the Secretary of State. That's when Joe traveled to Beijing on an extended official trip, and Hunter traveled with him on Air Force Two. After all, why fly commercial when you can be on Dad's little private plane there? During their stay, Vice President Biden met with President Xi for over 5 hours, covering, quote, every single topic in the U.S.-China relationship, end quote. Now, while Joe did this Joe thing here, Hunter was mostly out of sight. We don't know exactly what he was up to, but the deal was finalized between Rosemont Seneca and the Bank of China just 10 days after Biden's trip, and that pretty much gives it away, don't you think? The most powerful financial institution in China. Let me say that again. The most powerful institution in China formed a joint venture with this tiny little brand new Rosemont Seneca to create a gigantic new investment firm. It was called Bohai Harvest, RST. The RS stands for Rosemont Seneca. The firm is often called BHR for short, and we'll continue to call it that from here on out. Hunter Biden was a member of the board. Now, just so you can understand, this is like the son of the Chinese premier, China's equivalent to the vice president, who would ordinarily never be able to get into the same room as these guys. Suddenly, scoring a deal, sitting with the head of Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America. How did that happen? Sounds pretty much like a pretty successful business trip for Hunter Biden. Except his lawyer, George Messiers, insists last fall that Hunter did not conduct any business whatsoever on that 2013 trip. He says the timing of BHR's business licensing getting approved 10 days after the Biden's China trip, pure coincidence, because the paperwork had been submitted months before. According to Hunter's lawyer, the approval, quote, was not related in any way, shape, or form to Hunter's visit. Okay. So maybe the official approval of the deal wasn't related to the visit. But Hunter was certainly there only because of the deal. Getting photographed with Dad stepping off of Air Force Two and shopping with Dad in Beijing is the only reason these Chinese firms were interested in going into business with Hunter Biden. But that's not just my conjecture on my part. BHR's CEO, Jonathan Lee, admitted that is precisely why he went into business with Rosemont. In 2014, Lee told the Chinese newspaper 21st Century Business Herald that he became partner with Devon Archer. Archer is Hunter Biden's and Christopher Hines' partner in Rosemont Capital, because of Archer's deep ties to U.S. politics, including his close tie to Hunter Biden. Meanwhile, Joe Biden has insisted that he and Hunter have never, ever talked about business.
How many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings.
And so how do you know?
Here's what I know. I know Trump deserves to be investigated.
I'm sure business never came up in those 14-hour flights to and from Beijing. I mean, Joe Biden he was the White House point man for China for a year up to that point. So you might think that the conflict of interest with his son's China business would have been a natural topic. Also, if they never talked about business, I'm not sure how Hunter introduced Jonathan Lee to his dad, because Lee is Hunter's business partner. He's the CEO and director of BHR. So Hunter arranged for Lee and Joe to meet in the lobby of a hotel where they stayed during their 2013 Beijing trip. So is it like, hey, Dad, this is Jonathan Lee. He's my new pen pal, Chinese pen pal. No business relationship here at all, Dad. Doesn't make sense. Come on. A former senior White House aide told The New Yorker that Hunter's behavior during that China trip in 2013 invited questions about whether he, quote, was leveraging access for his benefit, which just wasn't done in that White House. Optics really mattered, and that seemed to be cutting it pretty close, even if nothing nefarious was going on. The New Yorker story said that when asked whether they discussed their concerns with the vice president, several of the aides said they were too intimidated to do so, or that they were afraid of hurting his feelings. One former advisor said, quote, everyone who works for him has been screamed at, end quote. Another said during difficult conversations about his family that Joe Biden would get deeply melancholy, to which, to me, is more painful than if someone yelled and screamed at me. It's like you hurt him terribly. And that was always my fear, that I would really be touching a very fragile part of him. Oh my gosh. Well, what perfect advisors we had around the vice president, all concerned about optics and feelings, so they let this Biden-China business happen on top of the Ukraine business. But in order not to hurt poor Joe Biden's feelings, the White House aides let these appearances of impropriety just go. That's textbook bad advising. So what did Hunter Biden get for trading on his dad's name in China? Well, only an unprecedented investment deal with the Bank of China, the Chinese Social Security Fund, and others. Remember, the Bank of China is government-owned. It is a business that is completely intertwined with the goals and the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. BHR also got the freedom to operate in the brand new Shanghai Free Trade Zone, where over the next 6 years, it would use $2.5 billion of Chinese government money to invest in China, as well as in other countries, including the U.S. You're going to love that. Now, no other company on planet Earth had such an arrangement in China. Nobody. Germans, nobody here, nobody in London, no one. But that venture with this brand new company went so well that just 18 months later, Hunter Biden struck another major deal with another Chinese company. Under the umbrella of Rosemont Capital was a real estate company called Rosemont Realty. In 2015, a Chinese company called Gemini Investments bought a 75% stake in Rosemont Realty. The company was renamed Gemini Rosemont. Well, Rosemont clearly married for the money because Gemini brought $3 billion to the table with the aim of buying Class A institutional quality commercial office properties in the U.S. market. The catch? Gemini Investments is a subsidiary of the Chinese Ocean Shipping Company, a.k.a. COSCO. Not Costco, but COSCO. The Chinese have COSCO, surprise, surprise, government-owned company. Its headquarters are in Beijing, and they are next to the headquarters of the Bank of China. China likes to keep things, in the communist family. COSCO is well known for its close military ties. It's essentially a branch of the Chinese Navy. Now think about this for a second. Imagine it's the Cold War. It's 1985, and the Soviet Union is buying up commercial office properties throughout the U.S. In fact, it's like that deep underground Soviet lair from Stranger Things. Except Stranger Things didn't happen. The Communist Chinese could really build one of those now, since they own actual property throughout the U.S. Thank you very much, Bidens. The son of the U.S. Vice President and the stepson of the Secretary of State now had major partnerships with what are essentially business proxies of the Chinese Communist Party. And all of that happened while Vice President Joe Biden and Secretary of State John Kerry were having high-stakes negotiations with the Chinese government between the BHR and Gemini investment deals. Over $5 billion was being made available to invest. Like I said in Ukraine Final Peace in the special last week, this is world-changing money. Now, I started this program tonight by telling you that Joe and Hunter Biden sold you and your children and millions of Chinese into slavery. That is an outrageous charge. So let me prove it to you. Okay, we're going to stop for 60 seconds and then right back into the show. I have to tell you about a new, it's not a dog food, it's a supplement for your dog. It is called Rough Greens Canine VitaSmart. I'm telling you, Uno, I had to feed him by hand. I swear to you, the vet would always yell at us, you got to feed him more. We're trying, he hates food all the time. Until we started using VitaSmart. Now, VitaSmart is, like I said, a supplement. What VitaSmart is all the live stuff. You know how you're supposed to take probiotics? I've been taking antibiotics this whole time. You need probiotics too. You need some, healthy bacteria and probiotics living inside of you. It's good for you. Well, all the dog foods, that's all cooked. It's all dead. It's all dead. So where are they getting that? They need those. And I'm telling you, Uno loves it. You want to see your dog thrive again? He's a different dog. Go to roughgreens.com Beck. Just try it. ruffgreens.com/Beck. Or call them right now at 833-GLEN-33. See your dog thrive again with Rough Greens. So which is more important to you, U.S. national security or a potentially lucrative investment for you and your family? I know how I would answer, but based on Hunter Biden's Chinese investment deals, the answer for the Bidens seems pretty clear. Not your children, not our national security, and certainly not the children of the millions of Chinese that are currently under observation and being rounded up by the Chinese police state. Now, before I go into BHR's worst investment, it is worth mentioning that from what we know so far, Hunter Biden's business arrangement in China is completely legal. I think it's unethical, grotesque. Personally, it's spiritually criminal. It's spiritual death. But the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act does not prevent foreign companies from hiring or making special deals with the children of U.S. government officials. Now, of course, in case you can cash in on your dad's office, you might want to think maybe you shouldn't, especially when there are U.S. national security implications. But we're at a time now that our founders warned us about. If men cannot govern themselves, this Constitution is wholly inadequate. We need now laws on the powerful, because the common decency and old-fashioned shame that we all used to understand, I don't think any longer exists. Now, there were red flags all over Hunter Biden's deals in China, literally, because, they're communists. But I want to highlight the four main problems with this partnership. Hunter Biden's problem, investment number one. In 2017, BHR invested in the facial recognition phone app called Face++. Now, this is an app that is incorporated into a separate app built by the Chinese government. Police in the Xinjiang region of China use that app to keep tabs on citizens and track and detain Uyghur Muslims. The app allows police easy access to all kinds of data about Chinese Muslims, including things like religious activity, blood type, even the amount of electricity that they use. Foreign Policy magazine describes Xinjiang region of China as a full-bore racist police state. Face++ is one of the bigger tools that the Chinese in communism use to imprison without charge hundreds of thousands of Muslims in an estimated 1,300 re-education camps. Now, I'm no investment guru or human rights expert, but I don't think you really need to be either one of those to think, that's enslaving people. I want nothing to do with it. Especially if you're the high-profile son of a recent vice president who in 2017 was already thinking about running for president, the president of the free world. Maybe you wouldn't want to be associated with Face++. Problem number two, Hunter Biden's association with Yi Jianming and Patrick Ho. Yi Jianming is a Chinese oil tycoon who heads a company called CEFC, China Energy. Like Costco, the Chinese company I told you about earlier, CEFC has strong ties to the Chinese military. Mr. Yi worked overtime to get meetings with top movers and shakers in the U.S. government. Well, his efforts included things like donating $100,000 to the Clinton Foundation, which was basically a rite of passage for any foreigner wanting access to the U.S. government during the Obama years. In 2015, Mr. Yi focused on trying to connect with the Biden family. By that point, of course, Hunter Biden's company was a year and a half into the partnership with the Chinese businesses and government. So, at first, Mr. Yi's top lieutenant, a guy named Patrick Ho, met with Hunter Biden in Washington, D.C. Well, that connection led to Mr. Yi himself meeting with Hunter at a Miami hotel in 2017. At that meeting, Mr. Yi proposed partnering with Hunter Biden's firm to invest in U.S. infrastructure and energy. But so far, it's unknown whether any deal was ever struck between Hunter and CEFC. Then in November 2017, Joe Biden's brother, James, you remember, the construction guy that has no construction experience, received a random call from Patrick Ho, Mr. Yi's top lieutenant. Ho apparently was in deep trouble and told James Biden that he was looking for a lawyer. Federal agents had arrested Ho in New York for violating the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and for money laundering. Ho had bribed an African official in Chad and Uganda for access to oil fields. His tactics included the very subtle thing like gift boxes containing $2 million in cash. During Ho's trial, prosecutors showed that Yi's company also had a side gig as an arms dealer in conflict zones all around the world. Ho was ultimately convicted of conspiracy, attempted bribery, and money laundering. Wow, it sounds like exactly what was going on in Ukraine. His boss, Mr. Yi, is now in Chinese custody at an undisclosed location. We should check Face++. Perhaps the weirdest and most cryptic part of this episode is what James Biden told the New York Times when they interviewed him about that phone call from Patrick Ho. James Biden said he was surprised by the call and believed that Ho had intended to reach Hunter Biden, so he gave him Hunter's contact information. James Biden said, and I quote, "There is nothing else I have to say. I don't want to be dragged into this anymore." Dragged into what exactly? Hunter Biden's investment problem number 3. In 2014, one of BHR's first major investments was in the China General Nuclear Power Corporation, that's CGN. It's a Chinese government-owned nuclear power company that sold off a stake of the company to outside investors. But here's the problem. CGN was under investigation by the FBI for paying informants in the U.S. to steal our nuclear secrets. In 2016, the FBI arrested the ringleader of this nuclear espionage, a man named Alan Ho. When they arrested Ho, he was using a random code generator to access funds being provided to him from where else? The Bank of China. Yet while this FBI probe was going on, the sons of Vice President and Secretary of State owned a stake in the company that was being investigated. And even after arrests were made, Rosemont Seneca did not alter its relationship with BHR, nor did it divest from CGN, even though it was stealing secrets, nuclear secrets, from the U.S. Yeah, you know, stealing is bad, but looks like the bad guys got caught, and it still seems like a good investment, so it's all good. Hunter Biden's problem investment number 4. In 2015, BHR partnered with the Aviation Industry Corporation of China, AVIC, to buy an American company called Henniges for $600 million. Now, AVIC is a gigantic military contractor in China, think Lockheed Martin, that makes the fighter jets, the bombers, all the drones for China. BHR bought 49% of Henniges and AVIC bought 51%. Now, Henniges is a precision parts manufacturer specializing in anti-vibration technology, the stuff that they call dual use. The State Department uses that term. It means technology that can be used for this and also military applications. Because of that, the deal has to be approved by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. Well, it has national security implications, so we got to look at it. The thing is, the American side of BHR, meaning Hunter Biden and his pals, had to know they were serious national security implications with AVIC. Because the year before they formed a partnership with AVIC, the Wall Street Journal reported how AVIC had used stolen technology related to the U.S. Air Force's F-35 stealth fighter and used it to build its own stealth fighter for the Chinese. How the Committee on Foreign Investment approved that deal remains an utter mystery that Scooby can't figure out. It remains a mystery because that organization has never had to publicly disclose any information about its decisions. This is your money and your country. This organization was established by President Gerald Ford in 1975 in response to OPEC countries increasing their investments in U.S. companies. When a foreign entity wants to buy 10% or more of a U.S. company, CFIUS reviews all of the deals to determine whether the foreign control of that company will impact our U.S. national security. The committee has voting members from 9 government agencies, including the State Department. While the Treasury Department doesn't release information about individual decisions, it has released data from recent years about the number of approved transactions. During President Obama's second term, they approved a crazy number of Chinese acquisitions, 128, by far more than any other country. The closest competition over that same period was 71, and it was Canada. What makes many of those Chinese acquisitions so alarming is that when you consider what's really at play here. It's hard for Americans to imagine the degree in which Chinese government and business work hand in glove. But imagine if the U.S. government owned more than 75% of every major company in the Fortune 500. And even those companies that had originally been privately started and owned were implanted with government-approved executives who made sure the company's activities were in the best interests of the Chinese Communist Party. And those executives actually sent reports on the company's activities to the Communist Party. We tend to view government and business as separate and apart, but for the most part, that's true here, for the most part. But it is exactly the opposite in China. The Chinese counterparts of Microsoft, Apple, Facebook are all effectively Chinese Communist Party companies who work for the general staff of the Chinese military. What Facebook and others want to do, but this is our vice president. All right, looks bad for Hunter and Joe Biden, and even for John Kerry and his stepson, Christopher Hines. The whole thing is brimming with conflict of interest. Oh, but they can explain. Next. All right, home buying season. Real estate conditions are looking really, really great for most of the country. In fact, if you tried to buy a $200,000 house in 2019 or 2018, it would have cost you about $200,000, and that was your max payment. You could now buy a $250,000 house because interest rates are so low, and you'd be paying what you would have paid for a $200,000 house. Right now, 10 minutes. You start the pre-approval process if you want to buy a house, or if you bought a house in 2017, 2018, you should refi, because you can save a lot of money right now. Do the fiscally responsible thing and call American Financing. I've known these guys for years. I trust them to serve you. They have served my family and my friends. They're family owned and operated and receive stellar ratings from customers just like you and me. You're going to work with knowledgeable professionals that are salary-based. They don't work for the bank. They just work for you. No upfront fees, custom loans, fast closings, and they got you covered coast to coast. Take advantage of the low interest right now. American Financing. Call them at the number on the bottom of the screen. Call them now or just visit AmericanFinancing.net. I would love your help in trying to get this trending tonight on Twitter, our Wednesday special, with a hashtag Biden China problem. This needs to be exposed. People need to understand, and I'll explain truly why. It's not about politics in just a second. So how have the Bidens and John Kerry's stepson, Christopher Hines, tried to explain their amazingly unethical and grotesque deals? Well, in 2018, Hines told the New York Times that he ended his relationship with Rosemont Seneca in 2015. If that is true, Hines ended his relationship. That means that he was still with them in 2014 for at least one of their most problematic investments, the one with China General Nuclear Power. As for Hunter Biden, he has been silent about his China deals for the first 5 years, but his lawyers have said Hunter's equity interest in the BHR fund didn't start until 2017, after Joe Biden left office. And even then, Hunter only put in $420,000 for a 10% stake. Let me put that into perspective. Professor Stephen Kaplan from the University of Chicago School of Business says a private equity fund with over $2 billion under management, as BHR says it has, will typically generate hundreds of millions of dollars. Kaplan says, quoting, "It's difficult to imagine, if not incomprehensible, that a 10% stake in one of those companies is only worth 420 grand. The distinction they appear to be making here is that they capitalized the management company worth $4.2 million, even though the fund manages $2 billion. The value of the management company is likely far in excess of $4.2 million. if they're managing all that money. Kaplan estimates the value of Hunter Biden's share of BHR closer to $20 million. Now, in October last year, Hunter Biden's lawyer announced that Hunter would step down from the board of BHR. However, he didn't give up his 10% stake in BHR. So now he gets the money for free. There are so many questions still needed to be answered about the Bidens with regard to China and Ukraine that have to be asked because laws must be changed. But every time you ask Joe Biden, he gets very heated about it. Watch.
Mr. Vice President, Tom Yamas with ABC News. How you doing? Got a quick question for you.
It's a question we tried to ask repeatedly.
Can we ask you about Ukraine and China?
But kept getting blocked.
Everybody looked at this, and everybody's looked at it and said there's nothing there. Ask the right question.
That's not true. But I do have good news for you. Last August, Senator Chuck Grassley sent a letter to the Treasury Department requesting specific information on how the Committee on Foreign Investment approved the deal in 2015 for BHR to partner with a Chinese military contractor to buy a U.S. company that makes technology with military applications. The Chinese military contractor built fighter jets using stolen plans of the U.S. Air Force's F-35 stealth fighter. Grassley received a classified briefing about the deal and the conflicts of interest involving Joe Biden and John Kerry. Then, just last week, Senator Grassley also sent a letter to the Director of Secret Service asking for records related to Hunter Biden's travels in China and Ukraine. He's exploring whether Hunter, quote, used government-sponsored travel to help conduct private business. Grassley's investigation is apparently still ongoing. He has received all of our material last week. It is nice that someone is finally bothering to look into all of this, even though it is 4 years and 1,300 concentration camps overdue. This is the first of our Wednesday night specials, and I hope it becomes something that we can share together every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. We are pooling all of our resources into this show. Doesn't mean I'm going to be not doing other shows for BlazeTV. I'm going to be giving my daily commentary at 5 o'clock with the news and why it matters. Of course, the radio program, and Friday, we have Friday exclusives for Blaze viewers only, which are going to be really, really cool, with newsmakers and the news of the week in review. But I can't thank you enough for making this possible, to be able to get our voices out on YouTube and Facebook and all these platforms where others can see them. And we ask that you would share them with the hashtags every week. Can we bring our hashtag up? And we ask that you try to make that, because that's when people start to pay attention, hashtag Biden China problem. We'd also ask that if you're not a subscriber, would you please consider subscribing to The Blaze? It is a great thing. You should have seen Steven Crowder's very funny Oscars night. That was on Sunday. We have Mark Levin. We have Chad Prather. Dave Rubin is on. Great shows all the time. BlazeTV.com/Glenn. Use the promo code Glenn and save 10% right now. Our specials are not about politics. If you've watched me long enough, you know that I will tell you the truth as I see it. Sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I'm very wrong. But I try to tell you the truth as I see it. This is not about politics. This is about the truth. If Trump had been in a secret plot where Ivanka was making all kinds of money selling arms to Russia, I would have been leading the parade for impeachment. It's wrong, and it's a danger to our society. This doesn't have to do with the personalities. It has to do with right and wrong. This is about Joe Biden, a former vice president, enriching his son and literally selling people into slavery with Face++, and enriching himself. This is just China. I mean, look, $1 million a year for Hunter Biden sitting on the board of Burisma. There was all kinds of dirty stuff going on there. You saw in our last special. Plus Chinese investments that stand to make him tens of millions of more. That is grotesque enough. But those investments, some of them are in companies actively engaged in espionage against the United States. And all of these special arrangements in the two countries where Joe Biden just happened to be heading up U.S. diplomacy is too bizarre to believe that they don't know this is going on. It's a farce, and it has to stop. This isn't about going to get Joe Biden. This is to make sure we investigate, make people pay, and change the law so it never happens again. It's never been about Biden's or politics. Hunter Biden's deals highlight the grave national security issues that we now have with China. China is a clear and present danger to the U.S., to the world, and all free people. Joe Biden clearly knows that is the reality with China, yet when asked, he says things like this.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They can't even figure out how to deal with the fact that they have this great division between the China Sea and the mountains in the west. They can't figure out how they're going to deal with the corruption that exists within the system. I mean, they're not bad folks.
Right. I don't know why he's choosing to downplay this reality, but it's not constructive. Remember, the Chinese government is set 2025 is the year of China. That's the deadline for their goal of global dominance. And that's now less than 5 years away. So the last thing we need is any politician who doesn't recognize China as an imminent threat or is playing footsie for cash. Let me remind you of the stats on who China really is. We're going to be doing an upcoming Wednesday night special in a few weeks. We will show you the reality of China. But let me just give you a couple of the stats we're working from. China currently employs an army of 180,000 cyber spies that launch 90,000 attacks per year on the U.S. Defense Department computer network alone. 41% of all cyber attacks in the world originate from China. The FBI has over 1,000 active investigations into Chinese intellectual property theft of U.S. companies. Chinese IP theft costs the U.S. economy at least $50 billion a year. 54% of all Chinese espionage activities against the U.S. are focused on our military technology. Since just 2009, there have been 106 cases of Chinese espionage against the U.S. that were caught by U.S. law enforcement, and those are the cases we know about. There are an estimated 150,000 Chinese operatives currently working in the U.S., targeting our military, our government, and our private sector. And that doesn't include the 360,000 Chinese university students in the U.S., some of whom have been caught stealing technology and research for the Chinese government. And now, just this week, the Justice Department charged 4 members with the Chinese military of carrying out the 2017 Equifax hack that compromised the personal information of about 145 million Americans. America is clearly at war. We are at war with the Chinese Communist Party, not the people, the Communist Party. The real problem is they know it. We don't. It is time that we go on the offensive. We are not going to take this corruption lying down. There are some exciting changes to my show. You will not find this anywhere else. What I have always known I do best is connect dots and tell you what's really going on. Every Wednesday night, I am going to go deep into the big stories and what they mean. The news and our country deserves to have someone really dig. We have a long way to go, but somebody has to do it. Wednesday, BlazeTV.